Welcome back to We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling, where I give you the tools and skills you need to love better so you can live better. The only thing worse than realizing you need a divorce is going through the divorce itself. You can and should Google it, but there are some things you simply cannot prepare yourself for, like how your spouse will act and feel, and how you will act and feel, and how those unpredictable variables will inform how you emerge from the process of divorce, how you will see and move through the world after divorce is behind you. People often assume that my first marriage ended because I realized I was gay. The truth is, that relationship ended because neither of us wanted to revive it anymore. It was a mutual decision because we each wanted our lives to move in a different direction. My divorce was one of the worst experiences of my life. When I was thinking about divorce and I was trying to prepare myself for it, I mostly focused on what I imagined life would be like after the divorce, what it would be like to live alone. Would it be possible to remain in each other's lives afterwards? I did not ever imagine that the process of divorce itself would be like a death by a thousand cuts. I didn't imagine we'd wind up in court, or that I'd be served with lawsuits for years, and that they'd be serving me with those lawsuits in my private practice, sometimes in front of my clients. I didn't realize that if you wind up litigating your divorce, preparing for court becomes a part-time job. That after working 10 or more hours a day, I'd have to review drafts of court papers or hunt from emails to use as evidence that my ex and I agreed to things in writing that he was now insisting we'd never discussed. I couldn't prepare for the things that were unfathomable to me. I started off wanting an attorney who would help the two of us remain close, like family. And if that seems like a lofty goal, well, all I can say is I never met a goal that I thought was too lofty. So that attorney did exactly what I asked her to. She kept things friendly. And he hired a pit bull who chewed up my nice lady and spit her and me out into little tiny pieces. So then I hired a pit bull who helped me fight tooth and nail, but who wasn't disciplined enough to prepare himself for court. He was used to winging things and coming out okay, only that is not how my trial went. All in, the litigation went on for 2.5 years. If I could go in a time machine and give my younger self advice, here's what I'd say. You can have a relationship with your ex, or you can have the money that you're legally entitled to. You will not get both. You can have your mental health, or you can pursue the money and assets that are yours. You will not get both. And you will lose years of your life because of the divorce, not only because litigation will rob you of the time while you're going through it, but because you will emerge with PTSD and a level of debt that will take you years to recover from. And then another decade because your litigation will end at the beginning of the Great Recession. Most importantly, you're about to enter the judicial system, which does not operate the way you've been led to believe it does. It moves slowly. It causes people to hemorrhage money while they're navigating it. And it is run mostly by men who are attorneys, just like the person you're divorcing, which puts you at a distinct disadvantage. A disadvantage which the judicial system itself is not set up to control for. This is not going to be a balanced, fair experience for you, mostly because you're a woman and also because you are not an attorney. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, most people getting divorced are not going to be attorneys, and half of them are going to be women. So where would that leave me? Exactly. Fucked. That's where it leaves you. It leaves us with a huge gap in services, particularly for women. We lean on attorneys not just for legal advice, but also for emotional support. And that is fucking expensive. It's also a service that attorneys are ill-equipped to provide. It's actually not part of their job description. You're quite lucky if your attorney can just do the job you hired them to do and get you through the divorce with your rights intact. I learned the hard way that that is probably the most you should hope for, which is why I'm so happy to introduce you to today's guest, because she is part of an emerging service profession that provides people who are divorcing with emotional support and with guidance on navigating the legal system at a fraction of the cost of an attorney. So you wind up using your attorney just for the legal stuff and someone like her for all the rest. Alex Kapp, thank you for joining me. Alex, how did you get into your line of work?
Well, step one was that I got divorced. So in 2014, I found out I was getting divorced pretty abruptly. And I went through my divorce. And I will say it wasn't the worst divorce in the world by, certain scales, but it's really horrible. It's a really hard thing to go through. And when I was finished, my divorce attorney took me to lunch, which I thought he said he'd never taken a client to lunch afterwards ever. He took me to lunch. And he said, you did a really bang up job on this divorce. And I said, oh my gosh, okay, well, thank you. And he said, have you ever thought about being a divorce coach? And I said, I have not, because I have no idea what that is. So that conversation happened in 2014. And I just, the next few years were just consumed with taking care of my two daughters who were in, middle school, high school at the time, and getting through it and grieving and trying to make a living. And I'd been an actress my whole career, so this wasn't something I was front of mind. And then in 2019, something tapped me on the shoulder, and I must have gotten an email or something came across my phone or my computer, and there was, a certification program for divorce coaching. And I, at the time, had no money. I was so terrified of what I was going to do next in my life, and I reached out to them and I said, I'm in, so let me do this. So I did. And I was certified. And then thus began this sort of second chapter of my life. And it's like the greatest thing I've ever done. So, I'm just thrilled. I love doing it. It's amazing.
What does a divorce coach do?
Well, it's interesting. It's a lot of things. So a divorce coach, and what I do is help people bridge the gap between themselves and their lawyer. I am there for emotional support. I'm there for logistical support. People are completely overwhelmed and lost when they come to me. And I think that's just the nature of divorce from in most cases. So it's my job to help them sort of manage the overwhelm and give them some steps and offer them some guidance, not advice, but guidance as they navigate this process. And most people have no idea what that process is. So it's also my job to kind of let them know. And it's just one step at a time. So I'm really holding people's hands as they go through the process with or without an attorney, with or without litigation. Maybe they just go through mediation, but I'm there to let them know that they're not alone, and that they're not the first person to go through it, and that they're going to come out the other side of it alive.
Do you sell hope, basically? And I'm guessing emotional support coincides with that, and strategy. Yeah?
Exactly. Tons of strategy. So, it's funny. One of the things that it's just sort of cemented as I've been doing this over the years, I think what I've landed on with, and what I land on with clients when I first meet them, when we first start working together, is that my goal for clients is to get them a negotiated agreement that they can live with. That's it, that they can live with. It's not about winning. It's not about revenge. It's not about emotional justice. It's not about giving everything up to get it over with. It's about coming to an agreement that you can live with. And the only way to do that is for you to engage in that process, whether you have a lawyer or not. You are in charge, not your lawyer, not me, not anybody else. You're in charge. And how you go through it, how you act, how you comport yourself as you go through it is based on who you are as a person, what your values are. And as long as you're staying in those values, you'll be able to live with whatever you negotiate.
Do you find that when you're working with clients, sometimes their attorneys are non-responsive?
Oh, yes. Yes, I sure do. Yes, I do.
Not that I have personal experience with that.
No, I can't
And that's part
imagine.
of why I cycled through 100 of them myself when I was going through it. And of course, I hear stories of divorce periodically, but generally, the people I work with are not in a divorce situation, and my goal is to keep them out of that situation.
Yeah.
Obviously, for everyone, divorce is a last resort. But when I have walked people through the process of divorce, it has been so reminiscent of my experience, in so much
Yeah.
as their attorneys at a certain point become non-responsive. And what the hell does somebody do when that happens?
Well, yeah, I think that's more the norm than not the norm. I think it also, interestingly enough, the more expensive the attorney, the more that happens a little bit. So Okay, so I'm going to give an example. So when I work with clients, I'll give my own example, which was when I first sat down with my lawyer. I hadn't even hired him yet. And I sat there in his office, and it was not a free consultation. And I sat down and I sobbed for 2 hours, just sobbing. And I looked across at him, and he looked at me with like this, like deer in the headlights, like, oh my God, I'm so bored. And I got my feelings hurt. I was like, God, this guy doesn't care about me at all. And like, why, I feel absolutely vulnerable, and I feel totally taken advantage of, and he doesn't care. And what I soon realized, I hired him, by the way. He was an amazing lawyer. And
You're
which
like,
is weird.
that said, the cold asshole wound up saving the day.
Totally did. And the thing was, is that he made it clear to me, like, your lawyer's job is not to make you feel better. Your lawyer's job is to do this transaction. Divorce is a transaction with a tremendous amount of grief and emotion piled on top of it. So, and it is going to be conflicted always. There is no way you're going through divorce without conflict. So it's really about learning tools to manage that conflict, to manage your emotional overwhelm, to recognize what your triggers are going to be, and have a plan attached. So with my lawyer, when he sat there looking at me blankly, I looked at my watch. I'm like, oh my God, I just spent like $1,000, like just crying. And what I realized quickly is that's not his job. So my job as a divorce coach is actually kind of that job. It's to help clients also broker the relationship with their lawyer, because the lawyer's not in charge. And what I find is that people come into this process with so much fear and so much just terror, overt terror. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my kids. I'm going to lose my money. I have everything to lose, and I'm upset and all this stuff. But if you bring that to the lawyer, you're going to spend a lot of money with the lawyer, and they can't help you with it. If we work on stuff together, we'll figure out what the questions are you need to ask your lawyer, what the next steps are, and put those in an email and send that email off. And that costs you $15. And that lawyer can then feel like, okay, I don't have to answer this crying, hysterical mess.
Exactly. Because what people don't realize is that because attorneys do not come into their field because have this huge container prepared to hold other people's emotions. Like, that is not why people become attorneys. They would become psychologists or social workers if they really wanted to deal with people's feelings. They come into law because they have a different skill set. And then if they work in family law, which is the category of law that manages our divorces, they find themselves on the receiving end of very activated communications. And those communications can overwhelm the attorney who is not prepared. And I don't mean to be overly extending empathy to them whatsoever, because I think that if you come into family law, you should fucking learn how to deal with an emotion when you're on the receiving end of it. And actually, maybe if you weren't a deer in the headlights, that conversation would have you would have been done crying with me in 20 minutes.
Right.
And I would have been done crying with you in 20 minutes, because you would have been in it with me, not frozen, petrified, ill-equipped to handle what was before you. But particularly women, when we lean on our attorneys for emotional support that they A, haven't signed up for, and B, they have no skills to handle those emotions, it's very common for them to become avoidant and to become passive and to not manage the case the way they need to, because they don't want to actually deal with the woman on the other side of that. That's what nobody says.
That's true. And it's 100% true. I mean, and listen, this is no knock against lawyers. There's some amazing lawyers. It's a hard job. I wouldn't want to do it. It's tough. I mean, and I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how the law works. I would never purport myself to be anything more than what I am. But I'll tell you, you're right. And it's rare to find somebody who goes into a divorce just joyful. The only people who don't have that kind of emotional overwhelm are people who've already left the marriage, whether with somebody else or, that situation, but even when two people decide mutually, like, hey, it's over, we're done, and we're going to do a really nice job of this, it's still sad. There's still a ton of grief. I mean, you are losing. It's the loss of a dream of what you thought your life was going to be. It's not just like, money or a house. It's like, obviously nobody gets married thinking like, hey, I can't wait till we get divorced. I mean, that's not
right.
That's not part of the plan.
And hope it winds up working out, because it basically is a 50-50 proposition.
Yeah. I mean, I just, just yesterday I had a client who settled on the first day of mediation. I was so proud of her, and because we prepped for it, and it was, and also because she's great, and also because her soon to be ex-husband, clearly he showed up at the table, and everybody deserves credit. But now, as I had just told her, now is I said, please reach out to, we're done together, but I said, reach out to me as a friend now, because as we all know, grief is not a straight line, and I could feel it. She's now the grief begins, and it's hard to grieve it when you're in it. But when it's done too, that's when sometimes the avalanche happens emotionally. So, I'm there to the end for people. I know what it's like, and you know what it's like, and it's pretty wicked. Divorce, it's much more wicked than, it's like we've all softened it, but it's not soft. It's a mean little animal. So
It really is. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I was curious, like, is your job done when the divorce is final? Like, my ex-husband and I, we didn't have kids together, thank God.
yeah,
But we did own and operate many businesses together, which necessitated that we communicate long beyond the signing of the divorce papers. Is that something that you help people with, whether it's businesses
totally.
or kids?
I don't necessarily just work with people with business sort of transactional mediation around businesses, but I could, because yes, communication is one of the biggest issues that people come to me with. People aren't speaking to each other. There's just so much contention and snark and resentment. And, about John and Julie Gottman, the Four Horsemen.
John and Julie Gottman, who are relationship theorists who have done research for 50 years. John Gottman is a well-known couples therapist. Carry on.
Yes, thank you for that. And so, yeah, they talk about the Four Horsemen, that basically the four guarantees that you're gonna end your marriage or your relationship, and it's stonewalling, criticism, defensiveness, and I don't know, now I can't think of the fourth one, of course. But when people come to me, I would say this: the overarching sort of messaging that has to happen in the beginning, and I will not take a
Contempt.
client unless they're clear.
Contempt.
Oh my God. I mean, so much contempt and so much resentment and so much black and white thinking. Like, if listen, everybody bandies about the word narcissist, like it's, narcissist and gaslighting every time every client comes to me saying, I'm divorcing a narcissist. Well, and I sort of internally chuckle, because it's everyone. I mean, I did it. Everyone does it, because of course you're dealing with someone that now is totally self-focused, who doesn't like you anymore, who is feeling the same way about you. And that's the thing. You got to break through some of that and a lot of that stuff to get people to understand that the bigger picture is, do you want to be divorced and in this fight, even after you're divorced for the rest of your life? Do you want to be fighting over your kids and nasty and having to be just incredibly awkward at events that you might bump into? You don't want that for the rest of your life. So the goal is to really help people understand there's a bigger picture, and you're going to do some stuff that's going to make you, and as these divorce coaching women I work with all the time say, you're going to do some stuff that's going to make you want to vomit in your mouth, because you're going to have to strategically work your spouse in a way that might end up flattering them more than you want to, or being kinder than you're in the mood for. Mm-hmm. But I tell you, when people do it, and when they control their communication, written communication and their texting and their verbal communication, magic happens. It only takes one person in the couple to change the dynamic. You don't need both people to do it. But once one person does it, the other one is either so shocked, like, why is she being so nice to me? Not over the top nice, just what Bill Eddy, who is a conflict specialist, calls BIF, brief, informative, friendly, firm communication. You just don't get into the weeds with your spouse. It's never going to get you anywhere. That's why you're getting divorced in the first place.
That's right. That's right. And if you use the same belief systems and tools and skills and way of moving through the world during the divorce that you used in the relationship, guess what? You don't need a genius to tell you you're going to get the same outcome. You have to behave differently in the divorce than you did in the relationship. Otherwise, you're not going to get through the divorce intact.
Right. And you'll be litigating and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers.
Or millions.
Nobody sees, or millions. Yep. And nobody will see any of it, because you're so busy trying to win or be right or prove to him that he's, an a-hole, whatever it is. You're absolutely right. And so you got to change things, and it's really uncomfortable, and it's really crucial. And people hate me for it.
I'm going to speak out of my lane, and please correct me if I'm wrong. When you say that just about everyone comes to you and is like, my soon-to-be ex is a total narcissist. I absolutely believe that because I deal with people with relationships and everybody's got an ex. And so often I hear that term thrown around left and right. In my intro, one of the things that I mentioned was that the legal system, the judicial system, particularly in family court, is quite oppositional to women, unfriendly to women, and has these judges. And I don't really care if I'm stereotyping. I will just say it. These judges have tropes about women being hysterical, all
Yeah.
of us out to gut our husbands and take them for all they're worth. So if you then go into court and start throwing the term narcissist around, I have to imagine that the judges are also tired of hearing that. And I
Oh, so do
have to
I.
imagine that we unintentionally just play into the stereotype of this hysterical woman, this histrionic woman,
Yep.
and then we just confirm every bias that this fucked up system has about
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. And, if you think about it, if you end up litigating, which is for me, I wish nobody had to litigate a divorce, meaning going to court and having this one person, this judge decide. And my thinking is always like, what if that judge is having a horrible day? What if you look just like his ex-wife? What if you're having a really bad day? What if you just something that came out of your mouth reminded him of something else? This one person is now going to determine your entire potentially financial future, the future of your children's custody. So why wouldn't we all at least try to sit at a table with each other and try to negotiate what we want and need instead of leaving it up to a judge, like you said, who absolutely may have bias. Everybody has bias. That we're all human beings. So there's so many ways to avoid getting to that point, but most of us don't know that. We think I am panicked. I'm making up this scenario. So if I find out my husband asks me to leave, I'm just making this up. This is not my story, but so my husband is like, I want a divorce, and I find out he's got a lawyer. Well, holy crap, I better go get a lawyer, and a good one. So now I'm on the hunt for this lawyer. By the way, have I ever asked myself, like, how much can I afford to spend on my divorce? What's my budget for my divorce? I've never heard anyone ask that in my life, but they should. So now here I am trying to find a lawyer because I'm panicked. I don't know what to ask the lawyer. I don't know what makes a good lawyer. I don't know any other lawyers. So I finally land on one. And now this lawyer is telling me, let me handle it, which is kind of the goal because you're trying to insulate yourself. But what if the way he wants to handle it isn't the way I want to handle it? And I don't have the courage of my conviction to say, hey, I don't behave like this in my life. I don't want to do that. Well, then you better listen to me because otherwise you're going to get screwed. Do you see? It's like we lose total control of the process because we assume somebody else is better at making decisions for our lives than we are. And it's total bullshit. They're not. That lawyer doesn't know who you are as a human being. They don't know your values. They don't know what's important to you. They don't know why it's important to you to keep your house or have your kids a certain amount of time. So that's part of my job too, is to help people understand, like, what's behind this? Why do you want to keep your house? You can want that, and let's if that's what you want, great. But what is it about the house that you want? Have you thought about how much it's going to cost in property taxes? How much it'll cost you to buy him out? Have you thought about, there's all this stuff. We think someone else has all the answers, but we have the answers, meaning the client, the person getting divorced. We just don't know it until I squeeze it out of them. So.
And so are you the woman behind the curtain, or do you actually ever speak directly to the attorney? Because I would imagine that the attorneys might be more open to a third party and not having to deal with the person that they've already decided is over the top because they're incapable of tolerating any emotions from the person who's fully in their amygdala, which is the part of their brain where
Right.
they're just like triggered left and right. They're in survival mode. When you're in your amygdala, you're not presenting as your best self. And if you're in the face of somebody who can't tolerate an emotion, it just gets worse. You don't
Oh,
get pulled out of that. So I would imagine that the idea of dealing with somebody a little bit more rational, which is to say just less activated, like a
right.
coach, might be easier for an attorney and might make an attorney a little less inclined to like gird their loins and come out of the hiding place of avoidance and lean into a conversation, a talk strategy. Do you ever directly speak to the attorneys?
No. And I wish I could. I mean, and in actual fact, I feel like from what I can kind of gather. I feel like attorneys maybe think divorce coaching is kind of like voodoo science. Like I'm not sure they quite have, it's actually recognized by the American Bar Association. It is a skill set, but I'm not sure they have, it may be a little conflict of interest. I don't want to say that. I mean, like I said, there are plenty of great lawyers in the world who aren't just after the dollar, but listen, the longer the divorce goes on, the more they get paid. So, and I don't make that much money. So it's not in my best interest to just keep it dragging on forever. So no, and I don't usually talk directly with lawyers. There's no way to do a comparison. Like how did this experience with this client go with or without a divorce coach? Because
Right.
that would be an interesting thing, without regulated emotional responses, without identifying triggers and understanding a bigger picture and really digging into what we want and our interests versus our position, all that. But I would love to be in a room with the lawyer and, I'd love to be able to coach my client so that everybody's on the same team. I'm not trying to take over anything. I can't. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a financial expert and I'm not a therapist. And so I just am part of a team and I would love it to be a little more engaged, but I don't think the lawyers, it's just more work for them probably in their mind to just, oh, here we go. Now here's another person who's getting on the payroll. And, I'm sure that's probably what it looks like, but it's just not that. It's not at all.
How do you manage to avoid accidentally stepping into the lane of therapy? Like under what circumstances, because you're providing emotional support, under what circumstances will you actually refer out to a therapist? And how do you make sure that you stay in the lane of coach versus therapist?
Focusing forward. So like most women, I probably have a fair amount of imposter syndrome anyway. So for me to pretend that I could pull off doing therapy would be like, it makes me want to be sick. So I would never do that because too scary. And I'm very upfront about it in the beginning. I'm not a therapist. I'm not. I mean, do I have some good, tips? I mean, I worked on breathing with somebody the other day who was in it. She was totally activated and completely spiraled. And so we just had to breathe. That's what we did. There's no point in doing anything else until she can, like you said, get her prefrontal cortex working again and get rid of the amygdala hijack and sort of calmed her down. But just focusing forward, I don't work on a lot of family of origin stuff with clients when they do start to go down that lane. And if I can sense, when I meet someone, I can kind of tell. I, first of all, often ask if they're in therapy because I think it's almost crucially important. I think it's really important. So if they're not, for some reason, and I feel a lot of family of origin stuff starting or a lot of patterns of behavior that's a lot of resistance there, then I'll always refer them to go to therapy because there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do in all different areas. And I'm not skilled at that enough to, like I said, to take that on. So coaching is about moving forward, about taking action steps forward. So whenever even I get in my own agenda, which of course happens, I'm a human being. Sometimes I'm like, I have to solve this. And that is, I have to pull myself back and say, nope, it's not my problem to solve. What does the client want? And I will just usually flip it back and say, okay, what do you want to focus on? Let's figure out, let's regroup. What do you want to be focusing on right now? What steps do you want to take?
But using that example of a client that you just taught a breathing technique to, what happens if that client is not able to follow your guidance? Is that generally a time where you're like, I'm not able to de-escalate this client. I'm not able to teach them emotional management skills. Maybe I need to outsource this?
Yes. It's only happened to me a few times where I really felt like I had clients who were really resistant to coaching. And it's my fault. I feel like when I do a consult with a client, when I first meet them, I ask some specific questions, kind of let me know whether they're coachable, because some people really want to just stay stuck in their story. And, one of the things I learned in training and continue to learn in continuing ed and stuff is that everybody comes to me with a story, obviously. And the first thing I do is hear their story. And I'm sure that's true for you too. It's getting them out of the story quickly. That is my job as well. So we all have a horrible story and we reenact that story over and over and over again, but it does not get us anywhere. So I can be pretty firm with clients. Like, I can't help you unless you let me help you. But if you're going to stay stuck in this story, and I've told clients before, I've had clients who've told me the same story 8 times. And on the 5th, 6th, 7th time, I'm like, okay, I need to stop you. I know this story because you've told this story to me a lot. So I know you feel like you need to tell me this story again, but it's getting in the way of the work we're doing because I know it already and you know it already. So how do we move to the next chapter? And if they can't, then, I will refer them out or we'll finish our engagement. I work with people either for 6 weeks or for 12 weeks. So I give it a lot of, a good try. But if somebody at the end of that engagement really isn't coachable, then I will just say, hey, I think you're better served going to therapy and really working through some of the stuff before you take the next steps.
I will say that when I went through my divorce, I probably spent equal amounts of money on therapy and attorney fees, which was
Yep.
quite enormous, quite abundant on both ends of those professions.
And as soon as I found out, well, in my case, but there was an infidelity. And as soon as I found out that that's what was going on, I was like, oh, I don't need therapy anymore because I thought I was crazy for the end of my marriage. I thought I was losing my mind. And so once I knew that I wasn't crazy, I was like, I'm done with therapy. Now I can get divorced. It was interesting. I mean, it was like a running joke with my therapist. He was amazing. And he said, well, I guess our work here is done. And I said, I guess it is. So it was interesting. I could have used more, but my biggest issue was just this disconnection with my own reality. And once I knew that I wasn't losing my marbles,
Right.
I was good.
Yeah. Having been through my own divorce, I know how important legal strategy is. And I don't want to go back into the recesses of my healed nervous system to recall all the reasons
Ugh.
why people who are divorcing need legal strategy, especially when they already have an attorney. But can you spare me having to do that and give an example of, so somebody's hired an attorney, why do they then need a divorce coach to help them with strategy when they've hired the attorney already? They already have an attorney retained.
I guess the simple answer, the short answer would be that the lawyer may have a strategy, but if the client doesn't, they're going to be the ones to suffer the consequences of that later. The lawyer's going to walk away at the end of this. Once they sign the papers, they're done. They don't have to live with the repercussions of it. But the client, the person who's getting divorced, the mother or father or just spouse, they have to live with this forever. And if that strategy that the lawyer had didn't line up, if they didn't engage in that process themselves, really being curious about what is important to me in this next chapter of my life, what matters to me, then they'll always live with resentment that they could have done something differently. Why did I give that up? Why didn't I give that up? Why did I fight so hard for that when it wasn't what was really important? And lawyers can't figure that out for you. I can't even figure that out for you. You have to figure it out for you, and I will be there to help you figure it out. But it's up to you to do the discovery and be curious about what motivates you, what is important to you, because you're starting a new life. It's a new life after divorce. It is not, you are not the same person. You have a different financial picture. You have a different physical picture. So what do you want it to look like? I don't want to just drop people off at the curb and say, you're divorced. See you later. My job here is done. I want you ready for the next chapter and have some hope and have a little bit of a plan. And if you haven't been working, what do you want to do? And if you've been working too much, maybe you can afford to do some creative things and take a little time off. So lawyers can't do all that. Their strategy is around the transaction. The client's strategy is around their life and their future
Values and
happiness and their
principles.
values and principles. Yep.
Are you helping with legal strategy throughout the process? Because not everybody goes to every single court hearing, or lots of times there are meetings in court that are not a trial. It's just, I don't even know what to call those things. But, your attorney will have to go to court to discuss things with the judge and the other side. And then based on that, they'll go back and there maybe is some other service provider that might need to be called in for help. Are there ever times during that process where you're helping your client because the attorney comes back and is like, well, here's what the judge said, and so that's the answer? And then the client reports that to you and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't have to be the answer. Is that
Yes.
your lane at all?
Here's the thing. The law is never my lane, ever. But what I find most of the time is that people have a meeting with their lawyer and then they come back and they're like, I don't know what they just said to me. I have no idea what that means. And so if I don't know what it means either, and most of the time I do this anyway, just to make sure I'm not unethically practicing law, I will say, hey, why don't we send an email and ask what that means, and ask your lawyer to explain to you what that means and what the repercussions are of that. Because it's like a runaway train. People just think, they sort of assume like the lawyer knows what they're doing. And so I guess that's what I should do. I'm like, well, no, this isn't about guessing what you should do. If you don't understand what they're saying to you, let's figure it out. Like, it's just asking a couple questions. So that is where I will kind of insert sort of, I'm not even inserting myself. I'm challenging them that if they don't understand something, they better damn well understand it, because this is their life. So, it's like signing a document you didn't read. P.S. I've done that a million times, but like, you sign something and you don't read it. And at the end, you're like, holy shit, what did I just sign? God damn it. Why didn't I read this? Why didn't someone tell me to read it?
Or you go to the doctor's office and you're in the gown and the doctor is telling you, rattling off a bunch of instructions and directives or lab results, and you leave there and you're like, what the fuck did what did that doctor
because
just
you're
say to me?
scared, you're emotional, you're overwrought, your amygdala has taken over. So when you're in an emotionally charged state, you can't hear anyway. So it's like having a medical proxy with you. It's like taking your sister to the doctor with you so they can take notes. That's what I kind of feel like. It's like we are so freaked out when we're going through divorce and so living based in fear. And when you still have to take care of a business, a profession, children, terrible behavior on the other side, constant triggers. It's like, it's too much. So yes, I try to never let the legal trained go too far off the tracks without the client. And by the way, that doesn't mean the lawyer's not doing their job, but I want that client to understand what that job is. I want them to know what these words mean before they agree to anything.
The number of times that I have personally been in court and, I have a PhD, I have a master's degree, I'm pretty well read. I kind of went to law school without meaning to, because my ex-husband, who was an attorney, and I were together when he was going to law school. And oftentimes I would wind up sitting in his classes, listening to the material. I certainly was immersed in the material throughout the entire process of his law school experience. And still, I can't tell you how often I'd walk out of a courtroom and I'd look at my attorneys and I'd be like, can you please decode what was just said? Because I don't know what just happened. Did we win or lose? I don't even know. And that puts a client in such a precarious position, because you do almost need someone to decode what is happening. And so often we already know that we're exhausting our attorneys. None of us want to be a burden. None of us want to look like the trope of the crazy woman. None of us want to feed into these stereotypes. So we wind up advocating for ourselves less than more, or more in the wrong ways. And, I can't tell you how often, like I said, I would walk out of a court and I'd be like, what just happened? And it's not like I was dazed and confused. The language that was thrown around and the rules and the culture of a court was so foreign to me that I didn't know what the outcomes were. And it put me in such a position where I could be so easily misdirected, manipulated, lied to, misinformed. Like, if something went terribly, my attorneys could say, it sounded worse than it was. Here's what they said in here. But truthfully, because we don't know what these words mean, we don't understand the legal system. For most of us, this is our one brush with the legal system.
Yeah. And also these documents that are written up by lawyers are so overwrought and sort of in legalese. I don't even know why they have to be.
I mean, literally Latin. Why are we writing in Latin?
I don't know. I don't know why it can't just say this, this, and this. At the end of the day, my ex-husband and I negotiated my divorce in my living room. We didn't have a lawyer sitting there. And by the way, it was my lawyer who told me to do that. He said, you know him better than anybody. You're an actress. Go in there and negotiate. And I can't, I couldn't possibly. I go, how could I do that? And he goes, because you can. And I believe in you and you can do it. That's why I love my lawyer. He saved me thousands of dollars. I mean, he really did. And I sat in my living room with my ex-husband and this is what it boils down to. He said, what do you want? And I said this. He goes, well, I'm not going to do that. And I said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, well, I'll do this. And I said, well, that's not enough. And then we split it down the middle. And that was it. I mean, that's not the case for everybody. And we had children that stayed with me. But all of that is to say, we all have power that we don't know we have. But when we are being assaulted by Latin legalese and fear and, panic and money fears and worrying about our kids and our lives and our livelihoods, it's like, it's impossible. So you just need someone there to kind of corral you and take smaller bites. You can't do it all overnight. You're not going to lose everything overnight either. you're not going to lose anything until, like, that's the thing. We all also assume that the other person has all this power, and the power differential can be really, like really massive when you're going
Mhm.
through it, especially like you were married to a lawyer. Immediately you go, oh my God, he's a lawyer. Most women will also say to me, my husband is a brilliant negotiator and he's charming and he knows how to win people over. And I have been a stay-at-home mom for however long, or I haven't, I'm not like that. And they think they have no power. Well, yeah, we all have power. And that's part of it too, is like, let's figure out what yours is, because you have it. You just don't know you have it. And one of the greatest powers is he can't get what he wants until you agree to it. And likewise, and I'm not just talking about, I work with mostly women, but I've worked with plenty of men too. Both of you have to sign on. So nothing's going to get taken away from you unless, at this early stage, unless you agree to it. So
I
yeah.
cycled through several attorneys during my divorce, which definitely sounds worse than it was. But like, we needed business attorneys and tax attorneys. So I think all in, I worked with 5 or 6 attorneys. Is it
Amazing.
common to wind up, and that's also, there was churn. So when the one didn't, I started off hiring a very friendly attorney. And when when we wound up in pulp on the ground, I wound up I fired that nice attorney and I wound up hiring somebody who was more of a combat attorney. So I'm just curious, like, is it normal to churn through attorneys, like to not wind up with the attorney you begin with?
I think it's probably normal. It isn't for me as much. I think the only time I see people really switching attorneys is when you do collaborative divorce, which is when you go to really, which I don't, it's funny. I wish I were better at it, but collaborative divorce is basically you bring lawyers in to mediate with you, which to me always seems like it kind of defeats the purpose of mediation. But you bring 2 lawyers with you and everybody's got the intention of settling. And if it doesn't come to a settlement in mediation with your collaborative attorneys, you have to fire everybody and start over. So that's part of the incentive for settling. But it's a little confusing to me. I'm not sure. I've never, it doesn't happen a lot. But so far, just in my experience, most of my clients will stay with the same attorney. They might switch once, and just because either they're non-responsive or they're too busy. But I can't tell you how many times I've had clients say, well, I know my lawyer's really busy. And I was like, yeah, you're also paying them a lot of money. So why are they too busy for you? Does that mean you're not paying them as much money as somebody else? They're busy for them, but I mean, they're too busy for you, but not for them. So you brought that up in the beginning, but non-responsiveness really bothers me because it's
It's
mean.
actually it's actually quite a power play. In relationships, the passive person has all the power.
Yeah.
It's not the assertive person with the power, it's the quiet one. Because ultimately, if they do
Yes.
nothing, nothing moves forward. So back to my question, what I hear you saying is that my divorce was probably on the extreme end of the spectrum, because most people don't churn through the number of attorneys that I churned through, which actually gives me relief and hope for the world, because I would not wish what I went through on anyone,
Yeah.
including my ex-husband. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It was
Right.
awful.
Well, do you think, I mean, here's a question for you. Do you think that going through all those attorneys got you what you wanted? Like, do you think it was worth it?
Absolutely not, but I did have to. I mean, I started off with a friendly lady because we were going to stay family. My goal was to be best friends at the end.
Yep.
And we thought we could do it. We thought we could do it. And then when the person he hired, I have since referred out to anyone who's needed an attorney. I'm like, you need my ex-husband's attorney. This
Yeah.
lady is a fucking pistol, and she will get you through this process and you will get everything you want and more, because she just literally annihilated us. She annihilated us. So when I saw that that's where it was headed, I had to switch attorneys. I
Yeah.
had to get rid of my attorney and hire a different attorney. So I hired the second attorney. Listen, the bottom line is, I really think that family law leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the quality of services that a person can expect to receive. And I do think that if there are up and coming attorneys in the world who have the capacity for holding some emotional space for divorcing individuals and have an interest in family law, if you want to make a killing in a field, go into that field, because you just have to kind of do your job to rise to the top. There's no competition. I
Yeah.
find the majority of divorce attorneys to be apathetic. They're basically like private practice bureaucrats, and they don't give a shit, and they're unresponsive, non-responsive. So I think somebody could come in and conquer that whole specialty of law if they wanted to. Sidebar, LOL.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I totally get it. I mean, part of the reason you asked me to come on here is, you know, if you haven't been through a divorce, how do you possibly negotiate a divorce? Like, it is so uniquely horrible that, and sad and painful and difficult and overwhelming and terrifying. And so I almost feel like as a prerequisite for being a divorce attorney, you should have to be divorced. I mean, like, I know that sounds crazy, but you can't possibly know the grief that people are dealing with while they're going through this process. And I think we all could stand some more empathy and some more understanding of where people are when they're there. Like, I know people come to me at different phases. Sometimes it's like, I'm just thinking about leaving, or I've already left, or I've already been through another attorney, or, people come to me at all different phases. But the essential principles and emotions and things we go through are always the same, and they're manageable. But you need someone who knows that you're there in order to help you manage it. Like, if someone has no empathy or hasn't been through it themselves, it's just harder. I don't know. I would never be a divorce coach if I hadn't been divorced, obviously. I guess that's sort of my point.
Here, I will agree with you to the extent that I think your divorce attorney really needs to be somebody who can hold space for your emotions and is capable of empathy. I don't think we necessarily have to have been divorced to be a divorce attorney, because I think pain is pain. I think we just need to not be armored up. I'm speaking
Yes.
as if I were a
Fair
divorce
enough. Yeah.
attorney. We need to just not be armored up and so calloused from our profession or from our experiences that we're not able to remember that the person in front of us, whether they're on the phone or video or literally in front of us, is a human being who is going through the hardest moment of their life. Like, one of the things we now teach MDs is that when you're cycling through the different departments of a hospital, when you're doing your rotations, when you're in the ER or the ICU, these are the worst moments of a person's life.
Yeah.
These are the worst days of a person's life and the people that love them. And in the last 10, 15 years, that training has really changed the medical profession
Yeah.
in a very positive direction. And I think that we need to have some mandatory continuing legal education credits specifically around this when it pertains, and trauma-informed legal guidance.
Yes.
Because people are getting traumatized. So to that point, I personally come from a family of fighters. I was raised that if you're in the right, you fight till you are pulp on the ground.
Mhm.
And that did not go well for me whatsoever. It is so hard to tell someone who is going through a divorce that money and control and access over their children may not be worth the PTSD that they'll get if they fight like rabid animals.
Yeah.
Is that advice that you manage to dip your toe in, or do you steer clear from walking into that sort of no-win situation?
No, it's not advice. It's recognizing that divorce is more than a fight. It's like there is no winner, and there are losers, but there are no winners in divorce. So you can fight to the death, but that's where you'll kind of end up. So yes, I do and in fact, I think I dip my toe in that a lot. I just don't give advice around it, because that's sort of antithetical to coaching. But what I do have people recognize is kind of what I was saying before, is like, what do you want your life to look like after this? What do you want? Do you want to continue fighting with this person until your kids are in college and beyond? Do you want to continue fighting over money in a business? Do you need that extra $10,000 so much that it's worth blowing out this entire future of a relationship with someone? Like, somebody said this in my training, which was, like, negotiation is giving up something you want for something you want more. And so part of it is figuring out, what do you want? And beyond your position, which means money or house or custody, but what is your interest? What matters to you? What matters to you? And if people are solely focused on the dollars and I deserve, 100% custody because I'm the only good parent and I'm this, Well, then good luck to you, because you're not going to get it. Because in every state in this nation, it's a general rule of 50-50 unless there's something real obvious. And I will tell parents all the time, well, my husband drinks too much or my wife drinks too much. Okay, well, unless they have a needle hanging out of their arm and you have a video of it, it doesn't matter if they drink too
Right.
much. Like, you're not going to win on that. And if you do start to go down that road and start talking about how much they drink, trust me, they're going to do it to you back. And do you want that? Now you're in a fight for your lives. And now your
Right.
entire lives are on display, and now your kids are in the middle. And is that worth it? Is it worth it? It's just widening out the picture. Like, it's going to suck no matter what. So let's make it suck less.
Right. Your
That's
only
it.
choice is how badly do you want it to suck?
Right.
And that is directly correlated to the amount of fighting you do during the
Yeah.
whole process,
Yeah.
is what I learned.
I'm with you. Like you say, you're a fighter. I am all about justice. And it's almost it's a thing I probably need to do some work around, because injustice makes me crazy. I mean, I
It's
fixate
one of
on
my
it.
it is one of my
Oh,
guiding principles.
yeah.
Justice, fairness, and
It's,
equity is one of my guiding principles.
yeah,
And it was incomprehensible to me that the world we live in is not reflective of that, but that
yep,
is part of adulting. You separate out the fantasy from the reality of the world that you're in. This question is a little like the last one, but with children. So lots of people going through divorce have kids, and they have a hard time distinguishing battles that are worth picking fights over versus those that they're not even going to care about in 2 years, but that their kids are going to be trying to work through on a shrink's couch 20 years from now. Do
correct.
you h how do you handle that?
Well, I think it helps that I have kids and I watched them go through this, and I was with them and had to help them go through it. And it was wicked. It was a dark time for everybody. And I think where I can give some guidance with people is, like you said, to recognize as soon as people say, well, if it's a woman who says, my ex-husband was never there for anything, and he's a, complete asshole, and he will never take care of the kids. He can't even handle himself, and he's always working, and he's always traveling, all these things. And a question I will often ask is, can you allow for a tiny bit of room in your heart and soul that there is room for this person to maybe change, that maybe he might be able to be a better parent away from you than he was in the marriage? And a lot of
That's a
people will
hard
be like,
pill to
yeah,
swallow.
it is a hard pill to swallow, and they don't swallow it right at first, but it plants a little seed. And I tell you, most people come to me saying, look, he may be an asshole, but I know he loves the kids. So if I have just this little kernel, and by the way, I weed that out in the beginning when I first meet people. So if somebody says to me, like, he's evil, I want to destroy him, I will not take that client, because I can't help
Yeah,
them. So
that
there's no
definitely
point.
seems like a fight with a blender.
It is. And I have to live with this too. I have to take this stuff home with me. It triggers my own stuff all the time. So I don't want it to keep re-traumatizing me either. But most people will say, he may be unavailable and he's never been there for me, but I know he loves the kids. And I'm like, okay. And do you think your kids deserve to have a healthy relationship with their father? I guess so, but he's not healthy. I said, no, maybe not right now. And so your job is to protect your kids right now. And hopefully we can get him to a place where maybe he does some work with a co-parenting specialist, or he goes to some therapy. Can't force him, but by the time he goes through the process, he may learn some things too. He may have to let go of what he's holding on to too, so that he can have a better relationship with his kids. So I see it all the time. And that's probably the hardest part, is the kid stuff, because as parents, we fight for our children, like with our lives. I mean, any decent parent would lay down their lives for their children. So it's really hard to imagine giving them up at all, giving up time with them, allowing them to be with this other, this person you hate. It's really hard, but it's the biggest pill to swallow, but it is swallowable eventually. But you're never going to be like, I'm so happy they're all together. It's bullshit. There's not that. We can only do as much as we can do. And there's still stuff that comes up even for me, like that. I just have to go, yeah, I know, there it is. I know it's not fair, but it's all right.
And by the way, when you have kids, there is no getting away from your partner. You have agreed to be in that person's life by virtue of having a child with that person
Yes.
for the rest of your life, because we hope not to outlive our children.
Right.
And so if our kids are going to live longer than us, then for the rest of our lives, we're going to have to find a way to be in the presence of that person at a bare minimum.
Yeah.
If not co-parent with that person. And that's just the decision you make when you decide to have a baby
It
with another
sure
person.
is. Mhm.
If you want a backseas, if you want to be out at some point, you do not have children. You cannot
Yeah,
have children with that person. Otherwise, you've got a partner for life. Their job title may change, but you're still in communication with that person for the rest of your life. And that
right.
is your choice. So if you think the person you picked to be your kid's parent is an idiot, then that's something that gets sorted out in your own therapy. That's not something that the kid has to pay the price for because
Yeah,
you can't get out of the way and find a way to collaborate and cooperate with their other parent who you chose.
right. I know. And I'm working with some amazing people right now who are just like making me, I feel like they're den mother. I'm so proud of the work they're doing because they're really dealing with difficult situations on the other side and still staying above the line and still putting their children first. And it's so crucially important because the thing is, and one of the first questions I also ask people is like, how do you want to see yourself at the end of this process? But also, how do you want your kids to be able to say you did? One of the greatest moments I ever had was in my early days of coaching. One of my daughters, I was making a video for something to sort of explain what divorce coaching was for social media. And my daughter was like, can I be in? I want to be in it. She was like 20 at the time, but she said, she on camera said, you did such a brilliant job at at this divorce. And I almost started crying because I was like, what do you mean? I did I really? Because to me, there was no greater compliment than having one of my children tell me that I did a good job for them, that I didn't put them in the middle, that I didn't turn them against their dad, that I didn't, make them negotiate our divorce. And it was really hard. I was really hurt and really betrayed and mad. And it was incredibly painful and difficult. But so is life sometimes. And so buck up, and you're right. You picked him. And by the way, I'm so glad I bred with my ex-husband. I mean, I always say that, he's a good looking guy. He's smart. He's funny. He can sing. He has all these
Got
great
some good
qualities.
genetics there.
Yeah, we had a nice little gene pool going. So I'm thrilled with the choice I made. Was he a great co-parent after our divorce? No, but that's all right. He wasn't the worst. So it's okay. It's okay. And we're
There you
going to my
go.
daughter's college graduation next week, and I'm actually looking forward to it. It'll be fun because those moments are the ones you want to hold on to. Because if you can get yourself at least to a place where you and your ex can stand there and revel in the joy and the beauty and the glory of the children that you created. Like, oh my God, look, we made that person. And look at this. That's what I'm looking forward to. Because there's only one person that feels the same way I do about it. And that's my ex-husband. So I'm not taking that away from him, and he can't take it away from me. So why not just feel that together, and then we can go back to our business and not see each other for another 5 years. It's great. It's ideal.
You said something a couple seconds ago that really it spawned a different question in me, which is you have to put the children first. But so often, what I experience when I've worked with parents, so the first 15 years of my career, I worked with teenagers, and my practice, alternatives counseling, was actually called Alternatives Adolescent Counseling Center. And we were one stop shopping for all things teenager. The kids who we saw as clients in that counseling center, their parents were mandated to parent coaching because there was no working with a kid without a parent as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't influence a child as much as their parents will. But what I will tell you from that experience that ties into this is back then I dealt with lots of divorcing families and lots of divorcing parents and divorced parents. And so often parents unintentionally get confused about what's in their kids' best interest from what's protecting their kids. And they think
Mhm.
that the battles that they're picking that feel protective of their kids are actually helping their kids, but I can see that they're harming the kids. And that even if the kid is not getting, micro cuts today, over time, if this pattern of communicating, of an inability to parse out what is imperative to fight over or negotiate over versus shit, you're not even going to remember these fights in a month.
Right.
And if you're not going to remember them, are they really worth having? Do you see parents oftentimes conflating protecting their kids for fighting, using the kids as the outlet to fight with their soon to be ex?
All the time. all the time. And it's interesting, I think about this all. If you're doing something with or around or for your kid that you wouldn't do if you were still just a married couple, then it's not about your kid, it's about you. You see what I mean?
That's
I didn't
so
phrase that very
good.
well, but like
No, you did.
it,
You did.
it,
You
we
know,
get this thing, like if once we're divorced, like, well, he has to be picked up right at 3 o'clock. Well, why? He used to take the bus home. Like, why are you suddenly so overprotective? Or suddenly, the other thing is, I heard this on the radio this morning, and I keep, it's something that we have to kind of remind ourselves as parents. You cannot protect your children from all pain. In fact, it's not good for them. They
no,
have to experience pain. That's life. Life is not a line that goes straight up and they'll never experience. There's no joy without pain. So you can't protect them from everything, and you can't sugarcoat everything and make it all pretty and perfect. And life wouldn't be that way married. And it wasn't that way married. So what do you want to model for your kids now? Like resilience and emotional management and, try to laugh your way through some stuff or cry or feel your emotion, all sorts of things. We can't protect them from all of it. And it's not our job to protect them from every single thing that might come their way. So, yeah, I think people go way over the top, being accusatory, and he's so irresponsible or she's so irresponsible and reckless with our kids. I'm like, well, or they're a human being and they're doing the best they can too. Yeah.
I think that was a great answer. I love that. How does somebody who is contemplating divorce know that it's time to start the process?
That's a great question. I don't really know how to answer it, except that when you know, you know. I think some people reach out to me, and I mean, just last week, a woman reached out to me, and it's like, you're not ready. You're not ready for me. I said, and I referred her to Gottman. I said, go do some work, because I think you still love this person, and it sounds like he still loves you. And don't get divorced. It's terrible. Like, do not
Right.
get divorced. Go do some work. And if you do a lot of really hard work in your marriage and you keep at it, and a year from now, you still are like, I don't want to be married to this person, then call me. But until then, don't. You're not ready. You're not ready. You're not ready. But I think we all know to some degree, either it happens to us, but I think when when you wake up every day and you're like, I hate this. Like, I hate this life. When you feel like you lost yourself, when you're a shell of yourself, when you've made yourself small, when you feel like you're modeling terrible shit for your kids or your friends, when all you do is complain, when you catch yourself giving dirty looks or turning yourself around when you're getting undressed so they don't look at your body. There are a million things, I think, signs that we feel when we're at the end of a marriage that's over. And then it's just a matter of finding, am I willing to go down this road now to end it? It's terrifying, but ultimately getting out of a bad marriage, I say this all the time, but there's no lonely, people are like, I'm going to be so lonely. I'm like, no, no, no. There's no lonelier place.
There's nothing
Ugh.
lonelier than being in a bad relationship.
Oh, it's so lonely. So no, the freedom on the other side, even waking up alone in my bed was like, oh my God, at least it's just me. At least it's me.
Yeah.
And I can take care of me now. And I thought that was pretty amazing. So yeah, I don't know when you know, but I guess you know when you know.
And also, I think you said something in the last question that you answered, which to me, this is how I like to guide people through ending any relationship. When you feel neutral, that is to say that they don't activate you because you've tried. You've tried to understand what it's all about. And also there's no pleasure. And you've done the work and there's just nothing. You just don't have anything. So in those situations, I would say when you can step away with the intention of dignity, of dignifying, giving the relationship the dignity at the end that it had at the beginning, I think that's when you know it's okay to step away.
Yeah.
And to the thing you said a second ago, which is you sent somebody to Gottman because they didn't seem ready. By the way, that couples counseling work is shit you need to learn for the next relationship. So you might as well
Right.
try it in this one. These are relationship skills that you must learn or you will repeat the same patterns.
That is so true.
I mean, I don't know. How long have you been divorced now, Alex?
Officially, it's since 2016, but separated since 2014, end of 2014. So almost 10 years, long time.
Are you in a new relationship or
Yeah,
have you
I'm
had
in
one
a-
since?
Yep, I'm in a relationship for about over 6 years, and it's great. We live together. I don't know that we'll ever get married. He's divorced too. Well, we just haven't, we're just not, we don't care. We're so happy. We're like, why mess
Have
with
you
it?
Have you noticed that some of your old triggers showed up here and that you had to
Uh,
heal some of that
yeah.
stuff so that it didn't get replicated in this relationship? Not to give you a leading question, but
No, no, you don't have to lead me because I just think this is hilarious. A couple months ago, I started calling my partner's name is Ian and my ex-husband's name is Christian, and I started calling him Christian. And I was like, oh my God. And I caught myself doing it. It happened over a period of about a month. And I just sort of moved in, and now we were suddenly, I was sharing a home with somebody, and he has a son. So we have a stepson. I have my stepson here every other week. And suddenly I was back in this traditional role. And I think I was having a little bit of, oh my God, I can't believe, and I caught myself calling him the wrong name like
well,
six
I will tell
times.
you, there are scenarios
Ah,
under which that would be worse. So if it was daylight with clothing on, you're a step ahead of a lot of people I know.
yeah. Well, thank God it was. And so, but I mean, I told him, I just came, and that's a news thing is that I came out and just said, wow, did you just hear me just call you my
Right.
ex-husband's name? He's like, I sure did. But because we're both divorced, we've done work. I mean, we haven't done work in couples counseling, but we're real sort of easy on each other in a sense, like we just are a good fit. We really are a good fit. We're older, I think part of that's just growing up and growing older and having just some more knowledge. But I'd jump back into, if we had started seeing real patterns like that, I would jump back in, and I know he would too. And the simple fact is that the statistics of second and third marriages, it's like 54% of all first marriages end in divorce. It's like 65, and then it's 76% on the third marriage. I mean, it because of exactly what you're saying, which is that people don't do the work and they just bring the same old patterns into the same old relationship, and you end up right where you started. So,
Yep. Doesn't even matter if you switch sex and gender and sexual orientation.
isn't it
Same stuff.
amazing?
Same stuff that you had
It's
in the last relationship is just going to carry forward.
it's incredible. Yeah, it is
Really
incredible.
is.
So,
What are some resources you would recommend to someone who's contemplating divorce or navigating a divorce themselves?
honestly, there's so many great books that I think are really helpful. Bill Eddy writes a bunch of stuff about conflict that I think is really helpful. There's a great website called divorcenet.com that it actually just is every law of every state, just to give you sort of it's incredible. It's a great resource. It's free.
Alex, thank you so much. How can people find you?
I have a website. It's goldenruledivorcemanagement.com. And yeah, I'm on Instagram as Golden Rule Divorce Management on Instagram, or Real Alex Kapp.
Alex Kapp, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. This was just fabulous.
We Need to Talk with Dr. Darcy Sterling is a Sterling Standard production. This episode was produced by yours truly. Editing and sound engineering by Bart Migal. Our theme music is by Trending Music. Special thanks to Amanda Christiani, Preston Smith, and Stephanie Sterling. If you know someone who's going through a divorce, please share this episode with them. If you have a question or a comment, or if you just want to send me an empathy email because I seem to have personal experiences with every topic that this podcast covers, email me at darcy@askdrdarcy.com. We'll be back on Tuesday with another episode packed with the relationship, dating, and mental health hacks you've come to expect. References are always linked in the show notes.